Black vultures in California have been seen playing doctor to birthing sea lions, helping to
What?
snip the umbilical cords for newborn infants, which they then take as payment, i.e. a little snack.
Oh,
And unsurprisingly, nature has produced some pretty bizarre creatures over the years. We've got animals that shoot blood from their eyes.
What?
Fish that generate their
no, go back. What? I did not expect that. Cool, okay.
fish that generate their own electricity, and insects that literally liquefy their prey from the inside.
Damn.
But few creatures can truly match the sheer insanity that are vultures. And these
Oh, yeah.
birds aren't just weird. They're
I don't know a ton about vultures, but I know that from what I've heard about them, they seem kind of gross because they like to snack on dead things. I don't think dead things are very snackable, so I know I say this as a bear, but still.
walking biological anomalies. Well, flying, actually. And proof of how weird and brutal evolution can be. And why, you ask? Well, just picture this. You're walking through a field on a hot day, and you feel the urge to cool off. What do? Well, normally you'd probably sit in the shade and maybe take a dip if there's some water nearby. But if you're a vulture, you'd probably just make your own water to cool off. And what I mean by
Piss?
that is you'd literally pee down your own legs. Yeah, that's right. Vultures will literally urinate on themselves to beat the heat, with the added benefit of also sanitizing their legs from any bacteria, because their pee is literally like acid.
Huh?
And that's not the strangest thing about
I think that's not too bad though. Like, I guess it kind of makes sense. If you're in a dry place and there's not a lot of water or shade available, I guess that's a strat you could use. Is it a little bit of a gross strat? Sure, but it's not the worst thing I've ever heard.
these birds, merely the tip of the iceberg, or should I say iceberg. Because to add on to that quirk, they also have stomach acid, strong enough to dissolve metal, a diet that revolves
wow.
around fighting death itself, and are able to survive in some of the most inhospitable environments the world has to offer.
And they're low-key, I'm sorry to say this, but for a bird, they're kind of ugly. I feel like I see so many birds that look a lot better than these guys. They're always just kind of disheveled, and I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm getting the evil vibes from them for eating corpses, but they just give me bad vibes. I don't know.
So safe to say, vultures are absolute freaks of nature. Now, this all being said, I should clarify that vultures aren't actually a single unified group. And in fact, many of them aren't even closely related. Rather, the term vulture actually just refers to birds found within two groups that just happen to share many traits. And these two groups are the Old World vultures, which is part of the family Accipitridae, and then the second group being the family Cathartidae, who are, surprise, surprise, referred to as New World vultures. And now you might be thinking, well, they must at least be partially related, given their names, and this is kind of true, since they do share a common ancestor. But that ancestor happens to have existed around 60 million years ago.
Oh.
And so despite Old and New World vultures looking and sounding superficially similar to each other, Old World vultures are significantly more closely related to eagles and hawks
They look a lot better too.
than to their New World cousins. And the reason for this separation is a literal one, because as the continents drifted further apart, the common ancestor was isolated, and thus the Old World vultures, like the lappet-faced vulture, adapted to life in Africa, Asia, and Europe, while New World vultures, like the California condor and turkey vulture, carved their niche in the Americas. But despite their separation, there are a lot of shared characteristics, and one thing both groups have in common is their ability to eat some of the nastiest stuff out there and not get sick. Now, as you probably know, vultures are scavengers, meaning that they eat things that are already dead. And while plenty of scavengers do exist, like coyotes, rats, and crows, almost none can stomach death like vultures can. You see, most scavengers are facultative, meaning they simply supplement their diet through scavenging and eat things through other methods as well, such as hunting and predation. But many vultures are different. They are what is known as an obligate scavenger, meaning they solely rely on already dead animals to survive, which is insanely rare among vertebrates due to the challenge of finding carrion in an energy-efficient manner. And because of their obligate status, they have evolved to be the perfect scavenger, and one of the keys to their success lies within their guts, literally, as their digestive systems are about as freaky as it gets. Now obviously, animals in general have acidic stomachs. I mean, that's the nature of how digestion works, with herbivores having an average pH of 5 or so, while carnivores are more acidic at around 2.2. But vultures, they take this to a whole other level, with a pH that can approach just above 0, which is insane. Because to put that into perspective, pH works on a logarithmic scale, meaning the difference between a pH of 1 and 2 is a factor of 10, while 0 and 2 is a factor of 100. Meaning that vultures have stomach acid that is about 100 times stronger than that of most other carnivores, and about 100,000 times stronger than that of an average herbivore, which also makes their stomach acid comparable to a form of battery acid. And it is this extreme acidity that allows them to consume carrion contaminated with bacteria, viruses, and toxins.
I was gonna say, because that way they can eat all the corpses.
That would be lethal to most other animals, including other scavengers. For example, pathogens like Clostridium botulinum, Salmonella, and Bacillus anthracis, which are responsible for botulism, salmonellosis, and anthrax respectively, are all neutralized within the vulture's stomach. And this actually makes them a very important part of the ecosystem, because due to this, they help prevent the spread of diseases, and basically serve the role as nature's recycling and sanitation system.
Thank you, I guess. Yeah, you know what? I guess I'm glad that I wasn't born a vulture, because that would be gross for me personally. So I gotta thank them for just doing that job for us, honestly.
Research has also demonstrated that the gut microbiota of vultures is uniquely adapted to survive and even thrive in this extreme environment, and thus further contributing to the resistance to pathogens. But what's crazier, and yet probably unsurprising, is that the corrosive nature of their stomach acid extends beyond mere disinfection. It also aids in the breakdown of bone and pretty much everything else for that matter.
Oh my
allowing
god.
vultures to extract nutrients from otherwise indigestible tissues. Furthermore, species like the bearded vulture are particularly adept at bone consumption, and
That's
not just from a stomach
crazy.
perspective.
Dude.
And I say that because these birds will literally drop large bones from considerable heights onto rocky surfaces in order to shatter them into smaller, more manageable fragments. Which, by the way, is a legitimate form of tool use. It also brings me to the next point
They're
that makes
smart.
these sky rats rather interesting, and that is their intelligence.
Mm.
Like I mentioned previously, facultative scavenging is absent in other animals due to the fact that facultative scavenging requires the animal to be very, very efficient with energy consumption and finding meals, which is generally prohibitive to other animals. But one thing that vultures have developed to help with this is a very robust intelligence. Now, birds in general are known for being quite smart, but vultures, they're close to the top of even the bird intelligence food chain, so to speak. You see, dropping bones on rocks is simply one form of tool usage seen in vultures. And other observations have included throwing stones at ostrich eggs to crack them open, and using twigs to rake wool from sheep pens in order to better insulate their nests. Which, by the way, I think is a concept that even most humans wouldn't know to do. And then beyond tool usage, they've also learned to be doctors without even going to medical school. Kind of. As black vultures in California have been seen playing doctor to birthing sea lions, helping to snip the umbilical cords for newborn infants, which they then take as payment, i.e. a little snack. And unsurprisingly, these showings of brains got scientists interested, and one group sought to test them in a controlled environment to see if they were just flukes or the real deal, so to speak. And to do this, scientists decided to test their problem-solving ability through something called the string pull test. This test consists of putting food on the opposite end of a string that is blocked by some sort of barrier. Now, normally in a successful test, the animal would somehow pull the string to them in order to eat the food. And certain bird species have shown to pass it, like ravens and parrots, who are also at the top of the bird intelligence pecking order.
Hi guys, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you!
But you see, vultures, and turkey vultures to be specific, are uniquely disadvantaged in this test. As compared to the other two, they have very weak feet that are poorly designed for grasping, thus making grabbing and pulling the string near impossible. But this did not stop them. Oh no. And instead, they decided the logical step was to use their throat pouch to swallow and store the string in such a way that they could bring the meat up, almost like a strand of spaghetti, where at the end, once they had the meat, they would then expel the string. So that's all to say, with their Lex Luthor-like intelligence, finding and getting food is a relative breeze.
Not bad, I'm impressed. Good job, vultures. And you know, the longer I look at them, the less ugly they are to me too. Like, I still think it's pretty gross, but again, someone has to do it, right?
Now, in addition to their acidic stomachs and brains, vultures have developed several other adaptations to cope with their scavenging lifestyle. For instance, their immune systems are remarkably robust, being capable of neutralizing toxins and combating infections acquired from a lifestyle of digging around decaying flesh, which is often extremely contaminated, to say the least.
Yeah.
One such adaptation being that studies have shown that vultures, both New World and Old World, have independently shown positive selection for genes which affect their T cells, which is a type of white blood cell crucial for immune function. And like I mentioned earlier, they, specifically New World vultures, also have a built-in hand sanitizer, or rather leg sanitizer, which comes from their unconventional habit of peeing and pooping down their own legs, scientifically known as urohydrosis. While this might not seem necessarily hygienic and healthy, from a vulture standpoint, it really is. You see, beyond just walking through literal death, vultures often live in hot and unforgiving environments, and therefore staying cool is not always easy.
Yeah, that's what I said in the beginning. I feel like that one makes kind of sense.
But by urinating on their legs, they can then take advantage of something called evaporative cooling, because as the urine on their legs evaporates, it draws heat away from their bodies, kind of like how sweating does for us, and thus helping them stay cool. And then in addition to cooling them down, it also cleans them, because they have a very high concentration of uric acid in their urine, which works to kill any bacteria and parasites that they might have gained from walking through their dinner, i.e. rotten meat. So yeah, basically a hand sanitizer, except that it only comes in one fragrance, and not a very good one. And this certainly must be an acquired scent, especially when we consider how incredibly sharp certain vultures' sense of smell is, with New World vultures having the largest olfactory systems of any birds that we know of, and being able to smell carrion from over 1 mile away. And it gets even crazier, because some, like the turkey vulture, possess such an acute sense of smell that they can detect the presence of certain gases at an unprecedented level, such as ethyl mercaptan, a gas which is produced during the very early stages of decomposition. And in fact, their detection of this is so precise that some gas companies have taken to lacing their gas with ethyl mercaptan just so that they can use turkey vultures to sniff out any leaks in gas pipelines.
Damn. Okay, that's pretty smart. But I mean, it makes sense. If they like solely live off of dead meat, they must be able to smell that, right?
Now, interestingly enough, in contrary to New World vultures, Old World vultures actually do not have a robust sense of smell, instead primarily relying on their keen eyesight to locate carrion. Soaring at high altitudes, they scan the landscape for signs of death, such as congregations of other scavengers or changes in the landscape. And surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly considering their close relation, Old World vultures have a visual acuity which is comparable to that of eagles and hawks, enabling them to spot signs of even small carcasses from great distances. And then depending on the location, they'll many times arrive and be surrounded by other vulture species right at the same carcass. And what you'll notice if you see a group of them is that regardless of the species, they often share certain visual similarities. And you might be thinking, well, no duh, I mean they're part of the same group after all. But here's the thing, you would notice this even if you mixed a group of New World and Old World vultures together, which, just as a reminder, are not closely related. You'd still see many of the same traits, like the iconic bald heads, curved beaks, long thin necks.
They look super duper similar.
Large broad wings, and in general similar coloring. And the reason being is like the other things we've talked about, these traits are found in common because they all help these freakazoids become the best scavengers out there. For example, their necks are long and flexible, so they can better reach deep into carcasses and into hard to reach cavities. And because of this habit and ability, their heads and necks are often sparsely feathered or even bald, which might not help them win any beauty contests, but it does help to reduce the buildup of bacteria and other pathogens on their skin.
Damn, I was complaining how ugly they are, and now I'm learning that they're just ugly because they needed to survive. Like, I'm sorry, vultures, my bad.
While feeding. And then their beaks are sharp and hooked because it allows for easy tearing through tough skin and muscle. And then finally, the reason for them all having large and broad wings is that it lets them soar efficiently to cover vast distances in search of food. In fact, you might not know this, but some vultures have among the largest wingspans of all extant birds.
I did not know.
Even though surprisingly, their muscles responsible for flight are relatively small compared to their body size, at least in New World vultures. But that's actually the real genius of it, because the whole idea is that they don't need to flap their wings that much due to their broad and massive sizes, which thus helps them conserve energy. For example, a 2016 study found Andean condors only flap their wings 1% of the time while soaring, and thus making them one of the most efficient flyers on Earth. But the craziest part is that despite this efficiency, the Andean condor, scientifically known as Vulture griffis, is the largest bird of prey alive, with a wingspan of 3.3 meters, or 10.8 feet.
Holy, that's a long wingspan. What the heck?
In other words, wider than most cars.
Yeah.
And it is this grandioseness, as well as morbidness due to their diets, that have made vultures an important symbol in many cultures around the world. In most, they are known as symbols of death, and sometimes might even be used in funeral rituals, such as in the case of Tibet. where vultures are central to the practice known as sky burials. In this ancient funerary rite, human corpses are offered to vultures as a sign of compassion and generosity, considering the underlying belief of Buddhism in that country. And then in ancient Egypt, vultures were also revered, but for different reasons. The vulture goddess Nekhbet was the patron deity of Upper Egypt. Often depicted with outstretched wings, Nekhbet symbolized maternal care and divine authority, and her image was adorned across many different things in ancient Egypt, signifying royal protection and the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt.
Oh, wow.
But unfortunately, despite their mythological powers, these freaky flyers are not invincible, and many vulture species face serious threats around the world, especially from poisoning. For example, lead poisoning is a big issue, as when they eat carcasses of animals shot with lead ammo, the dangerous heavy metal builds up in their system, eventually causing toxicity and even death. And this is surprisingly a widespread problem, with studies estimating that over 60% of adult condor deaths tie back to lead. And it's not just New World vultures that are in trouble, but also Old World vultures, especially those found in India and Africa, with some populations having even plummeted by 95%, causing many to be close to extinction. In fact, globally, 14 of 23 vulture species are now endangered or critically endangered.
I had no idea they were actually that endangered. I thought they were thriving, honestly.
And as a keystone species, ecosystems are very much in trouble, with diseases and pandemics becoming more likely without them. And this is actually already affecting people, with one 2024 study finding that over 500,000 human deaths in India can be linked to vulture declines caused by diclofenac poisoning, which is a drug that's being administered to livestock. So in other words, we really need to help nature's cleanup crew before it's too late. And so in the pinned comment below, I'm linking a conservation group that's dedicated to saving vultures in Asia, especially South Asia. So if you want to check them out, please do.
Please
That
do,
being
guys.
said, I'm not affiliated in any way, but I think they're doing some really good work. Anyways, thanks for watching, and until next time.
Okay, first of all, I'm sorry I was mean to vultures in the beginning. I had my character development. I now realize they are not as ugly as I thought. Yes, some of the stuff is gross from the perspective of a human. However, they are valuable to our nature and we should protect them. I just don't want to be physically close to one, but knowing that they exist gives me peace. So yeah, I will definitely be checking out the link that he mentioned.